Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the real-world economics of running your own business. We're going to break down the core principles you absolutely have to understand, from figuring out your costs to landing on that perfect price.
I mean, it's a dream for so many of us, right? To be our own boss, to build something totally from scratch. But, and this is a big but, turning that dream into a profitable reality, well, that means you've got to get a handle on a few key economic ideas. A brilliant idea is just the start. It's not enough. Real success, that all comes down to mastering three things: costs, revenue, and, of course, profit. And to make this all super clear, we're going to follow the journey of a new baker as she builds a cupcake business right from the ground up.
All right, so let's jump right in. Before our baker even thinks about selling a single cupcake, she has to know what the goal is. What's the point of all this? And in business, that goal is defined by one really simple but incredibly powerful equation.
And here it is. This is the North Star for literally every business out there. Total revenue minus total cost equals profit. That's it. Everything we're about to talk about today, every single decision our baker's going to make, it's all about managing the two sides of this equation to make that final number look as good as possible.
Okay, so let's tackle that first part of the formula, total cost. And trust me, this is where things start to get really interesting, because the true cost of doing business, it's way more than just the cash you see leaving your bank account.
So, if you have an accountant and an economist look at our baker's business, they're going to see two completely different sets of costs. The accountant, they're focused on what we call explicit costs. The actual money you spend, the out-of-pocket expenses. But the economist, well, they see a much bigger picture.
So yeah, explicit costs are the easy stuff to track: flour, sugar, rent for the shop. But the implicit costs, those are the hidden opportunity costs. For our baker, the absolute biggest one is the salary she gave up at her old 9-to-5. To an economist, that salary she's no longer earning, that is a very, very real cost of running her new business.
Okay, now let's add another layer to this, and that layer is time. Because costs, they just don't act the same way day to day as they do over, say, a whole year. In what we call the short run, some of your costs are totally fixed, but others, they're a lot more flexible.
And this brings us to an absolutely critical idea for anyone who makes anything: marginal cost. So let's forget about the total cost for a minute and ask a much more precise question. How much does it cost our baker to make just one more cupcake? That specific number, that's your marginal cost.
Now, take a look at the pattern here. It's kind of weird, right? To make the fourth and fifth cupcakes, the cost for each one actually went down. Our baker is getting more efficient. But then, to make that sixth cupcake, the cost starts to creep back up. So what on earth is going on here?
This classic U-shaped curve. You see this in almost every kind of production. At first, you get better and better at what you're doing. You're in the zone, specialization kicks in. But eventually, things start to get a little crowded. Maybe your oven is at capacity, resources get strained, and the cost of making just one more starts to climb again. It's like a fundamental law of making stuff.
All right, we have a pretty good handle on costs. So now let's flip over to the other side of our profit equation: revenue, the money coming in. And a massive factor here is how much control our baker actually has over the price she charges.
Basically, businesses usually fall into one of two camps. You're either a price taker, which means you just have to accept whatever the market price is. Think of a farmer selling wheat at a massive market. Or you're a price maker, because you have something unique that gives you the power to set your own price.
So if our baker is just selling a standard vanilla cupcake in a really busy market with a dozen other bakers, she's a price taker. The price is what it is. Let's say it's 1,000 naira. She sells one, she makes 1,000. Sells three, she makes 3,000. It's just a straight, predictable line going up. But what if our baker invents a totally new, one-of-a-kind cronut? Now she's a price maker. She can start the price high at 1,000 naira. But to sell a second one, she might have to drop the price to, say, 900 to tempt another buyer. To sell a third, maybe 800. Her total revenue is still going up, for sure, but not quite as fast.
Okay, this is the moment we've been building up to. We've got a handle on costs, we get how revenue works. Now, we can finally put them together to answer the single most important question for any entrepreneur, ever.
So how many cupcakes should our baker actually produce to make the absolute most profit? This is the million-dollar question. Or, I guess, the 10,000 cupcake question. And it's not about just baking as many as you can. No. There is a very precise, calculated sweet spot.
And here's the golden rule, the solution to the puzzle. You maximize your profit at the exact point where the money you get from selling one more item, that's your marginal revenue, is exactly equal to the cost of making that one more item, your marginal cost. Think about it. As long as making the next cupcake earns you more than it costs, you keep baking. The second it costs more than you earn, you stop. Right there.
So our baker has found her sweet spot, she's making a nice profit, awesome. The natural next thought is, let's get bigger, right? Maybe open a second shop or even a factory. But is bigger always better?
Well, as a company grows, it's like it's being pulled in two different directions by these powerful opposing forces. At first, as you get bigger, you get what are called economies of scale. These are advantages that actually lower your cost for each item you make. But if you get too big, you can start to suffer from diseconomies of scale. And that's where all that efficiency goes into reverse, and your costs actually start to climb again.
Yeah, in the beginning, growth is amazing. Our baker can start buying flour in huge bulk orders and get a massive discount. She can afford a bigger, way more efficient oven. The bank is suddenly willing to give her better loan terms. She can even hire a specialist marketing manager. All these things work together to lower the average cost of every single cupcake she sells.
But what happens if the bakery empire gets, too big? That's when problems can start to creep in. Decisions get slowed down by meetings and paperwork, bureaucracy. It gets way harder to manage a huge staff, and the employees might start to feel disconnected, like just a number. The whole company can become slow and inefficient. And guess what? That per cupcake cost starts to rise again.
So in the end, whether you're talking about that very first cupcake sold or the huge decision to build a global empire, it all comes back to that one fundamental idea. It's just a constant, non-stop balancing act between the money you bring in and the money you have to spend to earn it.
And that really brings us to the most important takeaway here. If you're thinking about your own business idea, don't just add up the cost of your supplies. You have to calculate the cost of what you're giving up to chase that dream. Because understanding both those explicit and those hidden implicit costs, that is the first real step to turning a dream into a business that can actually last.